Hi, everyone. My name is Leah Granger, and this is Curtain Call presented by FabCollab, where we interview powerful women in the arts. And today we have a really special guest with us today. Her name is Nour Hadidi, and she's the first comedian that we've had on the program. I've been wanting to do this for a really long time. I've been a big fan of stand-up and of Canadian stand-up, so this is really exciting for us. Nour, I'm going to tell people a little bit about you before I let you speak. Nour is a Canadian comedian. She's been featured on CBC News, Claire Magazine. She's one of Reader's Digest's 50 comedians to watch. She has written for This Hour is 22 Minutes, The Beaverton. She's performed at Just for Laughs and probably most of the comedy clubs in Canada. So welcome, Nour. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's very exciting. I didn't know I was powerful, so that was nice.
Yes, you're very powerful.
In the art. It's good to know.
That's you. That's you. So where are you speaking to us from right now?
So I'm actually in New York right now. I've been here for a couple of weeks just doing shows and been in Toronto all year, so it's nice to just get out and do comedy in other places. And I always have so much fun when I perform here. So it's been.
Is it your first time back to New York since the pandemic?
No, it's my second time.
Yeah. Are the audiences really different there than in Toronto? Like, is it noticeable?
I guess that's a good question. I think the audiences are just as smart. Like I started stand up in Montreal, and that's where I can tell a big difference because Montreal is a bilingual city. So a lot of jokes sometimes go over people's heads.
Right.
But I find that, the audiences kind of have the same aptitude. And I think that, after having been here, like, Toronto comics, I think, are so underrated. Like every Toronto comic who goes to a city in America and does stand up, like always does really well. We can really hold our own. So that's just really nice to know that like what we're doing in Canada, you don't know where you fit in the world.
Yeah.
But it's nice that when we go to New York and LA, like we're able to be just as funny, if not more.
Yeah. Like the level here is just really high.
Yes, because if you're doing stand-up in Canada, you really do it because you love it, And when you do something because you love it, because there's not that big of an industry like there is in the States. And I find that when you do something because you like just want to do it for the sake of doing it, it's going to come out in your art. And I think that really comes across when you go to see a show in Toronto.
Do you think that people in Toronto know? Like just like the level that they have here? Like, do you think that there's an appreciation for comedy in the city?
I think comedy fans know, like the ones who come out and watch every week or every month. I think the large majority are really big fans of US stand-ups. And I don't think it's because they don't like Toronto or Canadian comics. I just think there's no star system in Canada to have that amount of people get to know us,
Right, to like launch people.
CBC Debaters is the closest we have. Whenever I travel around Canada, people will recognize me from that, and they'll always, and because it's on the radio, they'll say, "Oh, it's nice to put a face to a name."
Yeah.
Whereas in America, you have a lot of late night shows and industry and specials and just so many platforms that can churn comics from just, stages to fame. And we unfortunately don't have that in Canada. But and that's why a lot of Canadian comics move here. At some point, they make the move to either New York or LA. Which is really unfortunate because a lot of comics, they don't want to leave Canada. They love it. It's our home. We have healthcare. We don't have guns. And we feel like we have to do it because we want to be um, you know, I would say more successful or more famous, you know? I think
Mhm.
there is success in being a full-time comic and being a full-time artist. Like I definitely see that as being successful, but sometimes you want a bit more. You don't want to have to worry where you're going to get paid 6 months down the line, you know? And in America,
Yeah.
I think at a certain point, you know, you can just feel more comfortable in making a living.
Mhm. Let's go back a little bit since I kind of just got into that whole side of things. But for people that don't know your story, you didn't start out in comedy. You were born in Jordan. You came to Canada, study finance at McGill, and you finished that degree, worked in that field, and then you got into comedy. So, can you just tell us a little bit about how those transitions took place, and sort of if you felt like it was something you always had in you?
I always loved comedy since I was a kid. Like, um, just watching TV shows or movies, something as like, you know, classic as Mrs. Doubtfire or Mad About You. But I never really discovered stand up as an art form until I was in undergrad at McGill and I was in my dorm room and my roommate was just showing me clips of like stand up comedians.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the point where I was like, oh, I think I would like to do this. But you know, I was 18, I was at McGill studying finance, and it just seemed like such an impossible thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Did you go see any
yeah,
comedy? Did you go to like Just for Laughs or anything like that?
I didn't go to Just for Laughs, but there was this Arab comedy tour where a bunch of Arab American comics would tour around North America, and they would come to Canada, and
Mm-hmm.
I would go see them because it was really fascinating that someone who looked like me and had
Mm-hmm.
my background could do this. You know, a lot of the comics I saw on YouTube were American, and not a lot of them were um, Arab, you know, or Muslim.
Yeah.
So that was really eye opening. And um, again, never thought I could do it, but was just so intrigued and loved watching it. Um,
So what gave you the push to be like, oh no, I can do it, and then like I will?
well, I was part of the McGill Arab Student Association, and we produced a talent show. And when we were producing it, I was like, oh, maybe I'll try something. But I didn't want to do it alone. So I just wrote some comedy sketches with some other people, and we did that. And the host that we hired for the talent show was a stand up comedian based in Montreal. His name is Ali Hassan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And yeah, he's a successful, like, wonderful comedian in Canada.
Yeah. He's really
And
funny.
I asked him, I was like, hey, where do you do stand up? I'm just curious. Because I had seen him host or open or be on those tours that I had seen. And he said, oh, there's a local comedy club called the Comedy Works, and they have an open mic night on Mondays. And so when I graduated undergrad, and that summer I was looking for jobs in finance. I have a degree in finance. And my dad was like, um, my dad was kind of like flexible. He was like, you can stay in Canada for 6 to 8 months looking for a job after you graduate, but at some point you got to come home if you can't find anything. So I did stand up in that summer because I just really wanted to do it. I think I did it once and it went well. The second time was horrible, and it was a lot, and I didn't want to do it again.
Yeah.
And I was just more focused on getting a job. And then luckily I got a job in October of that year. And it wasn't until, like, I think 2 years after that I did stand up again, because it was always in the back of my mind, but my focus was on getting a job so I could pay for rent, so I could stay in
Yeah.
Canada, and that was like when you're young and you just graduated, like that's the focus.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so like what was it like in the beginning? Like were you like this feels right? Like I mean obviously the second time as you said, wasn't
It's
great.
not
But
fun.
did you have any like, did things land at all? Like, did you have moments where you were like, no?
The first time, yes. The second time, no. It was really brutal. You know, it was like getting hit by like running into a brick wall.
Mhm.
Um, but it was always in the back of my mind. Like it's never something I let go of completely. I wasn't doing it. I wasn't going out watching shows.
Right.
Um, but then what happened was I was studying for a finance exam. I was trying to become a CFA, like a certified financial analyst. And I was so stressed out. And I was like, what would make me feel a bit better or loosen me up? And I just thought, oh, I think I want to do stand up again. So in April of 2012, that's when I started doing stand up again. And then at that point, I didn't stop. Like I took a 2 year break. Well, I wouldn't say break, like I just didn't do it for
Yeah.
2 years. But yeah, that's when I was like, and then I was a bit more secure in my job. And when you work at a bank, it's not that demanding in the sense that your job ends at 6 and then you just go home. You have your whole evening to do whatever you want.
Right.
And where I started in Montreal, like getting on stage 3 times a week was as much as you could. So it was very manageable where I felt like I was doing the most in comedy, but also doing a good job at work. Like the balance was a lot easier.
Hmm.
Kind of a better place to be for both of those things.
Hmm.
I had been interviewing for other jobs in Montreal, but it was really hard because I would really work on my French, but it was never like, it didn't seem like it was ever good enough.
Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard in
It's so
Montreal.
hard, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think it was a blessing in disguise. Like I remember I interviewed for a job at JP Morgan to be a corporate and investment banking analyst. And
Hmm.
I remember I made it to the last round. It was between me and another girl, and I didn't get it. And I remember really crying and not getting it because I didn't get it. But then, had I gotten it, I don't think I would have been a stand up comedian now. I think I would have just fully gone down the finance path, you know, like been a capitalist, living in New York, like disconnected from the world, you know?
Just miserable. So sad.
Well,
It's funny how these little
yeah,
moments, I mean, not necessarily, but like, it's funny how there's these little moments in life where, like, yeah, where it's like if you'd gotten that one job or if you hadn't gotten that other one, or if I remember like when I was in Vancouver and I got an intern. I was trying to get an internship in publishing and I didn't get any internships in Vancouver at like all the little magazines there. And I was like, great, like I suck at this. And then I got one the only one I got was at the Walrus, which is in
oh
Toronto.
wow.
And that's like the best one. Like to me, I was like, that's the one to get. And then I came out here and I've been here since like 2008. But like I wouldn't have come. Like I had no intention of being here. But these little these little moments, like it's crazy to think about. So how has it been? Like I'm always curious, like from the outside, I see like a lot of like amazing women comics, but I know that there are like challenges. What has it been like for you entering into this, like at that time, maybe like 9 years ago, as a woman and as an Arab woman?
Well, the scene in Montreal is very small compared to
Mhm.
Toronto. So it was a bit warmer and friendlier, I would say. When you're in a small scene, you kind of get to know everybody in the scene within um, 3 months, I would say.
Oh wow.
Um, yeah. And, you know, at the time, I didn't think it was hard, but I was a naive 22-year-old girl, like, or sorry, 24, 25-year-old. Like, I didn't really know, I wasn't aware about sexism and feminism to the extent that I do now. So I
Right.
think at the time I just thought things were normal. Like I was the only female on the lineup. That was just normal,
Hmm.
you know? Um, so looking back at it, yes, it was not the friendliest environment for a woman, especially a Muslim woman, where I used to feel guilt walking into bars, you know, that served alcohol because my parents like I had a strict upbringing and I had to overcome a lot of guilt with that. And like, there's a certain smell to bars that I hadn't smelled before. I know it's weird to explain, but like the smell of beer.
It's a bad
And
smell.
yeah, but I had never smelled it before.
Hmm.
And it made me feel guilty, but I kept going because I just really liked comedy, you know? And that's one of the things where people will say, oh, it's like, you know, unfortunately, some people will say, oh, it's like really easy to be a minority in comedy. That's what executives want. Nobody wants me because I'm a straight white man. And it's like,
Oh, I know.
no, that's not the case. Like, a lot of, if you talk to a lot of comics, they will tell you that they think of quitting all the time because it's not an easy job and there's no assurances and you never, like, it's not an
Mhm.
easy life. But for every, like, we all have those same reasons. And then people who are, you know, women, minorities, you know, who don't fit into what the comedy mold is, we have 100 other reasons that we think of quitting. So the road is harder for us. And unfortunately, like if you're a woman or a minority, you have to be really good to be on a lineup with mediocre white men. It's just the fact. I didn't feel comfortable saying this earlier, but I've
Mhm.
been a comic for 9 years and I have like, you know, credits and it's my life. I've been living it. This is my truth. So in the past, I would always feel weary about making statements like that. But
Mhm.
now I want to because it can validate the experience of someone younger in comedy who's just starting out, who is experiencing that, but is too afraid to say it, you know?
Yeah, totally. Do you feel like, do you feel pressure, or like is it expected that you like include certain things like in your act, like based on your like your the identity that you present, or is that sort of like not a
Um,
thing?
well, I've kind of been on my own journey with that in the
Mhm.
past because when you're starting out and you like book things, and I was a good comic, like I'm obviously way better now, but the levels at which I was at, I was doing pretty good. But a lot of people would say, oh, like when you move to Toronto, it's a bigger scene, it's way
Mhm.
more competitive. And so, unfortunately, sometimes people will say, oh, she only booked that because she's Arab or she's Muslim. And what that made me want to do is write jokes that were not about my background, like about brunch or yoga, to kind of prove to them that I can write jokes about things that you write jokes in, and I'm still going to get in because I'm good.
Mhm.
But then I had a conversation with a friend, and she said, you know, if we all write the same comedy, it's bland. We can't all be the same. And she said, if you don't write about being Arab and Muslim, then who will?
Yeah.
So that really freed me, and it gave me the leeway to write about whatever it is I want to write about. You know, so now if something is funny, I will write it. It will obviously come from my point of view, which is different than a lot of other comedians. Um, but I no longer feel restricted, if that makes any sense. And
Yeah,
I
that
don't
totally
feel
makes sense.
guilty or ashamed about writing about my background, you know, because it's who I am. And, you know, as an immigrant, you always want to assimilate and you want to prove that you're the same and you fit in, but it's a losing game and we shouldn't have to do that, you know?
Mhm.
Um, and in that sense, comedy has actually helped me step into my own um, and try to accept myself more for who I am.
Yeah, it's an interesting like journey, I think, for a lot of artists, where it's like there is this like tension between like not wanting to be viewed, I guess, as like it being tokenism. And so then, yeah, I guess like hiding those parts of your identity, but then it's like nobody else can tell those stories.
Yeah, and you know, a lot of comics when they start out, they just want to get a laugh at any expense. Like
Mhm.
that's what you want. So unfortunately, what a lot of minorities will do is make fun of themselves, but in the stereotypical ways that white
Mhm.
people make fun of them with. But then as you grow up, you're like, oh, this doesn't feel right. And so you start to write jokes from your own empowered point of view, regardless of what other people will think. Because I started teaching some workshops over the pandemic. I started teaching stand up with the Second City just because I had like nothing to do. And it, I had taught some workshops, so I thought it would be fun.
Mhm.
And since then, I started teaching workshops for people of color, because that first stand-up class I had was mostly, there was only one white person, everyone else was a person of color, and we had so many like conversations about that and material
Mhm.
that I don't think a white instructor would have been able to have.
Mhm.
And I always tell my students that you should write what you think is funny and not what you think other people will find funny, because the latter is a losing game. So it's been really cool. I put on the workshop a few times, and it's only limited to between 8 and 10 participants. And it's really great to like create a space for, you know, um, people to express themselves in a way where they're not going to be judged, where they can tell the truth, and where they can learn, regardless of whether they want to be comedians, they just want to use it in their work, they do it
Yeah.
for fun, just to provide that kind of space for them to do that.
Have any of your students gone on to do open mics or anything like that? Or are people sort of using it more just as like a pastime or something to like help them in their work and communication?
Um, I have some students who it's really hard because I taught them during the pandemic,
Yeah, totally.
and even until now, I don't think there's more than one or two open mics in Toronto that are running.
Yeah.
Some of them
Yeah.
have, but I don't know to what extent.
Yeah. Well, maybe can you tell me a little bit about because I know you also write for shows and for different things on the CBC. Um, I'm just curious as a writer, but who's not a comedy writer, like how did you sort of like make that leap?
I think stand up is a really, really great way for you to learn how to write good comedy in a short amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're getting an immediate reaction, and you can literally go home and then the next day work on the joke and try it out and see if it works. There's not a lot of other art forms where you can hone that skill every day, every night.
Or test that skill.
Yes.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So stand up was a really great way for me to learn how to write jokes. And the Beaverton was the first show I wrote on, and one of the showrunners and like creators of the show is a stand-up comedian, and he had just met me doing stand-up and asked me to submit a packet. So that's how I got my start in television writing. And it was a really great learning experience. It's a completely different set of skills. I think the common denominator is being able to write a good joke.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of other skills in a room. There's a lot of pitching required. So coming up with ideas at home and bringing them to the room. Also listening to what other people are saying when someone has an idea, taking it in, trying to build on it, tagging it. You really stand up is a very much me.
Mm-hmm.
And the room is like, oh, us. It's a very different mentality, I will say.
Do you like it being in the room?
Yeah, I mean, I like anything that helps me make a living.
I love it. It's the best.
Yeah, and I've learned through all the rooms I've been in, because there's a lot of times, a lot of shows don't get made. So I've been in a lot of development rooms where they're working on something and it just doesn't get greenlit by the network.
Yeah.
But I've learned stand up is me and how I derive my contentment and artistic fulfillment.
Yeah.
But when I'm hired in a room, this is someone else's baby and someone else's idea, and I'm here to help them. So you really have to let your own, you have to distance yourself. You almost have to see it as more of a job and less of a creative endeavor. And sometimes they will mesh, like the show you're working on aligns with your own sense of humor, but a lot of times it doesn't. And I credit 22 Minutes for helping me write jokes about things that I didn't really care about. Like that was a boot camp where the head writer would be, okay, in 30 minutes, I need 10 jokes from each of you on this press conference by Trudeau.
Wow.
And yeah, as a stand-up, I used to write, whenever I was inspired, I'd write something down. That's how it worked for me. But when you're paid to write in a room, it's like you just force your brain to do it. And it gets easier, the more rooms you're in and the more you exercise that muscle. So it's, the baseline is the same. Yes, I'm writing a joke for my act versus I'm writing a joke for a show. But how you get there and the point of view of the joke, like my stand-up is based on my point of view, whereas the show's voice and point of view is what transcends mine. And not a lot of comics can do both. Some people can write for themselves, some people can write for shows, and some people can do both, but it doesn't always work. And that's fine. I want to tell people, like, if you don't find it in you to write for another show, like, we're all on a different paths in lives and we all have different skills, and we tend to compare ourselves to other people, which when I was in finance was very easy because I'm like, GPA,
right.
What bank do you work at? What position do you have? It's a lot easier. But when you're in the arts, there is no ladder. We are all just trying to make our own way. And some people will take them 3 years, some people will take them 10 years. But if you do something because you love it, like you truly love it, it will come across and you will get your dues. Of course, assuming that you're, not a horrible person and, you're you're good to work with, right? Yeah. So
that you have the basics.
Yes, that's something I've had to learn the hard way, because it's really hard to be in a city like Toronto where it's very competitive and we get caught up in credits and we really forget why we do comedy. And it's always like show. And then the pandemic helped me relax and really take in every single show I'm doing because I don't take it for granted anymore,
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I mean, I'm a dancer and I feel the same way. It's like now, whenever there's an opportunity to be in front of an audience, it's like very grateful. Yeah. And you tell me a little bit about working on What We Do in the Shadows, because
that was my first ever acting gig. I booked that in the pandemic. I have not booked anything before or after it. So I keep sending in those self-tapes,
Keep doing it.
Yeah, but that was really cool. And
that was in Vancouver, right?
No, it was in Toronto.
Oh no. Okay.
That's where
I thought it was shooting in Vancouver, but it's here?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and I remember that day I was so sad. It was the day that Doug Ford had extended the lockdown.
Like in the spring?
Yes.
Yeah, that was terrible.
I was like crying in bed. It was such for us, like Canadian artists, I think the lockdown had a really big toll on us. And I did not want to go to set. Honestly, I took everything in me to get there. But when I got there, I did makeup, I did hair. I was really nervous. This was my first acting gig. But then once I was on set and doing it, it was just so nice to be out of the house and feel competent. And the last take, they let you ad-lib and improvise. So I was kind of riffing and doing comedy. It wasn't pure stand-up, obviously, but it was some sort of artistic expression. And it was really, really nice. I had 2 scenes. And then when they wrapped, the crew applauded, and I hadn't been on stage since November. It had been 6 or 7 months. And I was like, oh my God, I can't. And then I was like, hey, can I, because my friend Sharjil was also on the same episode. He was shooting his scene after me. And this was a night shoot. Like they started at 8 and I didn't tape my scene until 1 a.m.
Okay.
And I didn't want to go home. And I was like, hey, can I just watch Sharjil? Like, no, actually for COVID, you have to go. I was like, oh, okay. And then I was just like, didn't want to leave.
You're like, I'll just hang in the back here.
Yeah, I'll just stick around, you know? You guys won't even see me.
They're like, no.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, it must have been nice. I think it's been like that for everybody, just to finally be like with people, and also like to be working in a team again. I think for me has been really nice to like collaborate with people. Has been.
You don't realize it. I mean, stand-up is very much a solo job, but when you get to the venue, it's like a built-in community. Even if people are not on the show, they're just hanging out there. You say hi to everyone. You look at the lineup. You say hi to the host. These little interactions like really help with your own like happiness.
Yeah, that's been like studied, is like the small interactions you have, like even with acquaintances, like the people you say hi to in the hall at like the office, or like you're saying, like this like community, even if they're acquaintances, because it really seems like there is in comedy, just as a person like observing from the outside, that like at the comedy bar or at these places, people, or you even see it in like television shows about comedy, that there's like a crew of like comedians kind of like at the bar, like talking about like the ins and outs of like the night. And that's so nice. And they are like, those things do, like they make you feel like you belong, and like people will like miss you if you're not there.
Absolutely. And a lot of comics, you know, they'll sleep in and won't do much during the day, unless like you have a day job and you're still not doing comedy full time. Because we spend a lot of energy at night talking to other comics, performing for people. You know, comedy's kind of both a job and the social aspect of my life. So when that was gone, it was a really big hit.
Yeah, totally. Well, I'm glad it's happening again. Can you tell me, like, is there like a particular gig or like a particular job or a particular set that like really stands out to you, that like as like a moment that was really like satisfying?
Yeah, when I moved to Toronto, my first year here, this was 2015. I did not get on stage for 3 months because I had started a new job. I had moved. It was the winter. You know, it was just, I didn't know anyone. Like, I moved to Toronto not having done comedy like there. So it was a really, really tough move. And I remember in the summer of that year, I had like done one of the shows I really wanted to do, and I bombed, and I was just like, what am I doing? Like, should I even do comedy? And then a few weeks later, I got booked to do this show at the Danforth Music Hall. I hadn't heard of the show before. Yeah. And at the time, it was the biggest audience I had performed to, like 1,500 people. I had never been on a stage or a theater that big.
It's crazy.
Yeah. And then it was taped for the radio. And on the show, on the lineup, were all these like big Toronto comics that I looked up to that I never been booked on a show with them. They didn't know what I was capable of because I just didn't. It's really hard to get booked when you move to a new city. And I did a good job at that show, and it was just a really satisfying moment. And that's when things started to get better for me in Toronto, where like we were like, oh, I did a show with Nour, she was funny. And that set was played on the radio, so I got my first ever radio play, you know, for the first time. And it helped me get into the Winnipeg Comedy Festival, which is one of the top 3 festivals in Canada. And it was all because of a producer named Tracy Rideout. She had seen my set, and she produces a show called, oh God, she's gonna kill me. Oh, Our Toronto? God, okay. I'm so horrible. I don't even remember the name.
Oh, no, it's okay.
Toronto.
We'll find it and we'll throw it up in the chat.
Yeah, so that was really nice.
Is there like, who do you really love? I didn't prep you for this question, but like, is there anyone in Toronto that you would like tell people, you know, who maybe don't totally know the scene, like anyone that you would shout out to?
There's a lot of amazing talent in Toronto. I feel like I would be doing
It's true. I shouldn't have you single anybody out. Where should people go to see these? Or is there like a show that
Well,
like people
Comedy
should
Bar
check?
is great, and there's
Mhm.
a label called Comedy Records that puts out a lot of great albums of Toronto comics that people may not have heard of. There's so many great comics. There's one comic who's been doing it a really long time, and his name is Arthur Simeon. He's
Mhm.
just so funny. Like, he's incredible. I love Sandra Battellini. I love Natalie, my friends who I do stand up with, Natalie Norman, Hodo Hersey, Brendan Ash Mohammed, Courtney Gilmore. Um, just like, there's so much talent in Toronto. People um, can follow them on social media, go to the Comedy Bar site, see what shows are on.
So what do you have coming up? I know I was asking you earlier that you've got a really busy week. Has this been like, how long have you been like had a schedule like this again?
You know what? It really goes up and down. October
Okay.
was very busy month for me, and
Great.
then November was really empty, and then December I kind of like, it really comes in waves. And that's the unpredictable thing. Like, next week is absolutely crazy for me, but then after that I have maybe 2 gigs in January, you know.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and I'm doing a show at Comedy Bar on Saturday with my friend Natalie at 7 p.m. It's called We Will Date You. And it's just a show about our dating experiences and jokes about that.
That's this Saturday?
This Saturday, yeah, the 18th.
That's next Saturday.
Oh, next Saturday. Sorry. Yes.
Perfect.
Next Saturday. I apologize.
Fabulous. At the Comedy Bar, and it's like a duo sort of show?
Yeah. We get on stage together. We do all our dating material. We're best friends as well. So it's really just like a lot of fun and really loose. And we have a PowerPoint presentation of all the guys we've dated. So it's really silly.
Have any of the guys that you ever dated seen the show?
No.
Cool. That's
No.
probably for the best.
I think Natalie had a guy at the last show. He told her she's had an honorable mentions category, and he told her he was a hippie. And then when she met up with him, he told her that he was in the army, and she's like, I don't think you know what a hippie means.
Does not compute.
Yeah, no.
And what else do you have coming up?
I'm hosting my friend Hodo's album taping on January 13th. She's so funny. She's got 2 shows at 7 and 9 p.m.
Wonderful.
Yeah, might do a show on Christmas because I'm Muslim and my best friend Natalie's Jewish, and we don't really celebrate it. So I think she's found a venue for us to do a show at, so that also might be something this month.
And I bet you there's definitely an audience. I mean, of course there is. On the 25th, there's people looking for some non-Christmas entertainment.
Yes.
And then like, if people, for example, I know you have like a whole bunch of stuff coming up next week. Where like, are you online where people can find the information if they just want to see you as part of someone else's show? Or
yeah, I post all my shows. I usually make like flyers for the next couple of weeks as to where people can find me. So if they want to follow me on Instagram or Twitter at Nour Hadidi, I think that's the way to go.
Okay, amazing. Well, I don't know. I really appreciate you being here. It's like the first time that we've had this window into the industry. We actually have another comedian coming on next week. Do you know Naomi Sneakus?
Yes. She's great. She's wonderful. She's more of a, sketch,
more improv.
Acting. Yeah.
Yeah. I've been watching her for like the last decade. I've gone to a ton of improv in Toronto, and her and her partner Matt are really incredible. And she's done so much other stuff with her like Firecracker department.
Yeah.
Podcast and all of that work. So we're really excited. And she loves you. I told her you were.
Oh, I love her too. She was wonderful.
She was like, Nour's great. That'll be awesome.
That's so sweet.
So we'll have her, and we'll hear about that side of things, which is a whole other basket. But we're looking forward to it. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us and to share about your journey and about your world. And and yeah, and have a wonderful holiday, and we look forward to catching some of your shows in the coming weeks and months. And we'll be back.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For
We'll be back
having me.
next week with Naomi Sneakus. Thank you so much.